Welcome as we look at the Gospel of John with eyes for Generation Z. My name is Tanita Maddox, and we're going to read through the Gospel of John, keeping in mind 6 key questions that Generation Z is asking based on their values and worldview, and 2 key questions they're asking about God. The goal of this project is to uncover and share a relevant Bible reading and gospel to Generation Z. Let's talk about John 12 and Jesus anointed at Bethany. We're going to deal with the questions, do all people matter to God? And am I safe? Do all people matter to God is an interesting question in this passage. We have this Mary who has taken this very expensive perfume and washed Jesus's feet with it. In verse 5, Judas asks, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It is worth a year's wages. We do have a reference to social justice and this question of what a waste of money. We could have helped so many poor, hungry people. However, we learn in the next verse that Judas's heart was not in that question. He wasn't really caring about all people in that moment. Verse 6 says he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. So here we see the Bible actually calling out Judas for saying that he cares about the poor and the hungry and the widows and orphans and the marginalized and the oppressed. But really, he is using those funds for himself. Jesus says to Judas, leave her alone. So he defends her in her actions, knowing that Judas's motives are not right. They're impure motives. He's not really asking about the poor. Jesus goes on to say it was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. So he's starting to allude to what's going to come up next in the next few chapters, which is Jesus's death. And then verse 8 says, you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. At first glance, it can look like Jesus is saying that he's more important than the poor, so that money should go to him instead of the poor, which would put him kind of in the same place as Judas. And Bruner talks about this in his commentary on John. He's saying that Jesus is commenting on the fact that while God is always with us, the physical presence of Jesus is not always there. So this is not a commentary on how God feels about the poor, but more about Jesus's physical presence, his preparation for what's going to happen next, as well as also knowing that Judas is not really asking about how to help the poor in that moment, but how to help himself. So Jesus does not get baited by the fake concern of Judas, but rather deal with the bigger picture of what God is doing in that moment and what will happen with Jesus. Am I safe? Well, we see here that Jesus will not let the woman be publicly shamed. He speaks against that, so she can feel that safety there. In verses 9 through 11, we have a large crowd of Jews found out Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So we know Lazarus is around. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many Jews were going over to Jesus and putting faith in him. There are some violent plans that are coming toward Jesus. So am I safe? So in this situation where we have people who want to harm Jesus, harm Lazarus, it is reasonable to ask the question, am I safe? Now remember in John 10, we dealt with the shepherd who will lay down his life for his sheep because his sheep are valuable, they are loved, and he will do that to protect his sheep. Doesn't mean that harm also doesn't exist out there that wants to come our way. This passage can be used to really identify what does it mean for me to feel safe. There is a physical threat here, so the question could be, no, I am not physically safe because there are people who want to harm Jesus. They want to harm one of his followers, Lazarus. What does that mean for me? Safety doesn't necessarily mean the lack of being the subject of hatred or people wanting to come after us, hurt us, oppress us, publicly shame us. It does mean that we are with that good shepherd from chapter 10 who will give us life and life to the full, as well as lay down his life for those that are his sheep, which is us. It's complicated because it does make us wrestle with our ideas of safety. What does real safety mean? This passage does open a lot of boxes and a lot of questions that doesn't necessarily give nice, easy, happy answers. And this passage is more about pointing to what is going to happen. But this passage in John 12 really does start to answer the question, can I trust you, as it begins to uncover and show how the prophecies from the Old Testament begin to be fulfilled in the life of Jesus. So this passage cannot be taken as a standalone, but in partnership with what is about to happen, because it's tied to too many things that are going on to be able to address the questions that Gen Z is asking.